There are many kinds of silence. The quiet in a church on a Sunday morning, heavy with waiting. The quiet in a forest at first light, alive with things moving unseen. The quiet of a man holding his breath in the dark, listening to voices that should not exist where he is standing. In Georgia, 1857, there was a plantation where silence had become something more than just absence of sound. Something alive that wrapped around the throat of anyone who dared speak the truth. The white columns of Riverside Manor rose 3 stories high, casting long shadows over cotton fields where 200 people worked under the harsh sun. But the worst secrets did not live in those fields. They lived inside the walls. This is not a tale about ghosts or spirits. It is a story about what happens when a man learns things he was never supposed to know, and how the very structure of a house can become a confession chamber for sins that could shake an entire county to its core. This is a story about how sound moves through hollow spaces, and how some silences can be far more dangerous than any scream. What you are about to hear has been carefully pieced together from courthouse records, letters discovered in an attic trunk in 1903, and the sworn testimony of 3 people who were there. The truth of Riverside Manor was buried for very good reasons. Perhaps it should have stayed buried. But some stories refuse to stay quiet. Samuel was 32 the first time he heard the voices in the walls. He had been born on Riverside Manor, as had his mother before him, and he carried the quiet patience that comes from learning early that being invisible is the only way to survive. He was unremarkable to look at. Average height, lean from hard work, hands scarred from years of carpentry. Master Garrett had noticed his skill with wood when Samuel was only 14, and since then he had cared for the big house, fixing banisters, repairing loose floorboards, replacing rotting window frames. This was considered a stroke of luck among the enslaved people of Riverside. Housework spared one from the cruel labor of the fields. It meant better food, cleaner clothes, and most importantly, being quiet enough that the white family barely noticed your presence. Samuel had mastered the art of being unremarkable. It was late March when everything changed. The afternoon sun shone through the second-floor windows, lighting up dust motes that floated like tiny ghosts. Samuel knelt by the baseboard in the guest bedroom, examining a section that was beginning to pull away from the wall. The Garretts were hosting a dinner that evening for neighboring plantation owners, and Mistress Garrett had insisted that everything be perfect. Samuel slid his pry bar behind the baseboard and gently pulled. The wood came off far too easily. Behind it, instead of the solid brick he had expected, there was darkness, a hollow space, perhaps 6 inches deep, running along the base of the wall. He had worked on this house for 18 years and had never noticed it. Samuel leaned closer, pressing his ear to the gap. The hollow seemed to stretch along the wall in both directions, and then he heard something that made his breath catch. Voices, not the muffled sounds of people in other rooms, but clear words, as if spoken right next to him. Yet the guest bedroom had been empty all morning. "Can't keep this up much longer," a man said. Samuel recognized the voice. Master Garrett himself. "You have no choice." The second voice was rough, unfamiliar, with an accent he could not place. "The debt is what it is. You pay, or everyone will know how you really got this land." Samuel's heart raced. He should replace the baseboard and leave immediately. He should forget he had heard anything. But he stayed, ear pressed to the wall, because what came next froze him completely. "The shipment arrives next Tuesday," Master Garrett said, his voice trembling in a way Samuel had never heard before. "After that, we'll have enough to satisfy Charleston." "No one will find out anything," the rough voice interrupted. "Not unless you are foolish enough to write more letters." Footsteps faded. A door clicked shut. Samuel sank back on his heels, mind racing. He was not supposed to hear that conversation. Master Garrett's study was at the far end of the house, separated by the main staircase, and at least 40 feet of solid walls. Yet the voices had been perfectly clear, as if carried through the house by some strange architectural trick. He carefully replaced the baseboard, hands trembling slightly as he tapped the nails back in. When he finished, nothing seemed disturbed. But Samuel could not stop thinking about what he had heard. "The debt is what it is. Everyone learns how you really acquired this land. The shipment arrives next Tuesday. That evening, as Samuel carried firewood through the back corridors of the house, he found himself studying the walls in a new way. Riverside Manor had been built in 1791 by Master Garrett's grandfather, when this part of Georgia was still considered frontier land. The house had been expanded twice, once in 1803, again in 1829, creating a sprawling structure full of odd angles and unexpected spaces. Samuel had always assumed these peculiarities were from the expansions, but now he wondered if there was more to it. The dinner that night was long and loud. Samuel stayed in the kitchen quarters, helping prepare and serve the many courses Mistress Garrett demanded. But his mind was elsewhere, turning over the puzzle of the voices in the walls. The next morning, Samuel began his investigation, though he could not have explained what he was looking for, even to himself. He just knew something was wrong at Riverside Manor, something that had been hidden in plain sight for years, maybe decades. His work gave him access to every room in the house, and he used this carefully. He moved through rooms with his tools, apparently checking for loose boards or cracked plaster, but in reality examining the walls themselves. He tapped panels gently, listening for the hollow sound that revealed hidden spaces. He studied where walls met, looking for places that seemed out of alignment. What he found was extraordinary. The house was filled with hidden passages. Not large rooms, mostly narrow gaps between interior and exterior walls, 6 to 8 inches wide. But they formed a network running throughout the entire house, connecting rooms that seemed far apart. Even more, these passages seemed designed intentionally. In certain spots, the gaps widened into small chambers, each placed exactly under vents or next to chimneys. Samuel realized he was looking at an acoustic system, deliberately arranged to carry sound from one room to another. Someone had built Riverside Manor so that conversations could travel unseen, like water flowing through hidden pipes. But why? The answer came on a Thursday afternoon when Samuel was repairing a cracked window frame in Master Garrett's private study. The master was away in Savannah, and Samuel worked alone, carefully removing the damaged wood. Behind the frame, he found another hollow space, bigger this time, maybe 18 inches deep. On a small shelf inside rested papers. Samuel knew he should not have touched them. Every instinct, honed over 32 years of slavery, screamed to leave them alone. But his hands moved on their own, pulling out a leather folder tied with string. Inside were letters. The first letter was dated October 1838, written in elegant script. It spoke of secret cargo arriving safely from Charleston, of profits quietly divided among a few conspirators, and the need for absolute silence. Samuel read carefully, comprehension growing with every page. The letters described business dealings between Master Garrett and men in Charleston, shipments that arrived at night, unrecorded in any official records, but they never say exactly what was being transported. There were 12 letters, spanning 1838 to 1856. The most recent, from just 3 months ago, carried a note of barely hidden panic. The investigation in Charleston has made some of us nervous. Senator Williams assures me no evidence links us to the operation, but burn all correspondence. If the federal authorities find out what was moved through Georgia in the 1840s, no one will escape. Samuel returned the letters to their hiding place, mind racing. Now he understood why Master Garrett had sounded afraid. Whatever he was involved in, it was illegal, dangerous enough to risk federal investigation, even years later. But what exactly was being transported through Riverside Manor, and how did it relate to the house's strange acoustic passages? Over the next weeks, Samuel mapped the hidden passages with painstaking care. He moved slowly, careful never to spend too long in one spot or ask questions that might attract attention. Gradually, he identified 5 locations in the house where the acoustic effect was strongest, places where, pressing an ear to a baseboard or vent, one could hear conversations from rooms that should have been out of reach. The first was the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, where he first discovered the voices. The second was a small linen closet off the main staircase, which carried sound from Master Garrett's study perfectly. The third was in the attic behind. A loose panel let voices from the dining room below rise up through a chimney chase. The fourth was in the basement storage room, where a small gap in the foundation wall carried sounds from the library above. The fifth and most unsettling was in the quarters where Samuel himself slept. A tiny room just off the kitchen house. In the corner behind his pallet, a crack in the plaster revealed another hollow space. Through it he could hear everything Sire aid in Mistress Garrett's private sitting room just above. He had been living beside a hidden listening post for years, without knowing it. The realization made his stomach twist. Had someone been listening to him, to the quiet conversations he held with other enslaved people, who sometimes visited, to his prayers, whispered in darkness before sleep, or was he supposed to be the one listening? This last thought struck him late, one night, as he lay awake, staring at that crack in the plaster. The hidden passages connected his quarters to the family's private spaces. They let him hear conversations no enslaved person should ever hear, and his place in the house, trusted carpenter with access to every room, gave him both freedom and excuse to discover these channels. What if someone had wanted an enslaved person to hear these things? What if the house itself had been designed to create informants? The thought kept him awake until the first light of dawn. After that, Samuel began listening on purpose, though it filled him with both fear and fascination. He told himself he needed to know what Master Garrett was doing, that this knowledge might somehow protect him or the others at Riverside. But the truth was, he listened because silence had become unbearable. For 32 years he had moved through this house as furniture, as tool, as property. The voices in the walls made him human again, someone capable of seeing, of knowing, of judging. It was dangerous, risky humanity, but humanity nonetheless. On the first Tuesday in April, Samuel was in the small linen closet when he heard Master Garrett's voice coming from the study below. The wagon arrives at midnight. I want everyone away from the east fields. No one sees anything. No one hears anything. Another voice. Mr. Bennett, the overseer, responded. What about the house workers? Send them to their quarters after supper, no exceptions. And Bennett, make sure the east wing doors are locked from the inside. I don't want anyone wondering. Samuel froze. Hands on the shelf he was repairing. This was it. The shipment he had overheard, mentioned weeks ago. That night he lay fully dressed on his pallet, waiting. The house creaked and whispered around him as usual. At 11:30, he heard footsteps crossing the yard. Master Garrett and Mr. Garrett and Mr. Garrett and Mr. Garrett Bennett were moving toward the east side. Samuel got up and went to his door. It was locked from the outside, just as Garrett had said, but Samuel had been a carpenter for 18 years and knew every floorboard, every lock in the house. He slid a thin piece of metal into the gap and felt the bolt give way. The night was warm and moonless. Samuel stayed in the shadows, moving along the edge of the kitchen garden until he reached the split-rail fence bordering the east fields. From there, he could see the road leading to the river landing and two dark wagons moving slowly up the path. The wagons stopped near a small barn used for storing equipment. Master Garrett appeared with a lantern. In its light, Samuel saw three men he didn't recognize, rough and purposeful, moving with the skill of people who had done this many times before. They began unloading the wagons. The cargo was not cotton, tobacco, or anything legitimate. It was wooden crates, maybe 24, each about 3 feet long, unmarked. The men carried the crates into the barn quickly, speaking in low voices that did not carry across the field. In under 30 minutes, the wagons turned and headed back to the river, and the men dispersed. Samuel waited until they were gone, then crept closer. The barn door was padlocked, but the building was old. He found a gap between two boards, wide enough to look inside. The crates were stacked against the far wall, faint starlight filtering through the ventilation slats. Some had stenciled writing, machinery parts, Savannah Foundry. But Samuel knew the Savannah Foundry. He had repaired furniture for a merchant who used them and remembered their legitimate shipments always had registration numbers and dates. These crates had none. Samuel returned to his room, replaced the bolt, and lay awake until dawn, mind buzzing. What was in those crates? Why hide them at Riverside? What would Master Garrett do if he knew someone had seen them? The answer came sooner than expected. 2 days later, a young woman named Ruth arrived at Riverside Manor in chains. She was around 25, thin, exhausted, with a fresh brand marking her as a runaway. Master Garrett had purchased her at auction in Augusta, paying a high price despite her fugitive status. Ruth was put to work immediately in the kitchen under Mistress Garrett's personal housekeeper, but Samuel noticed something odd. Ruth never spoke. Not a word. She communicated only with nods and gestures, her eyes carrying a deep weariness beyond ordinary fear. On her third day, Samuel was repairing a cabinet in the kitchen when Ruth approached him. She checked to make sure they were alone, then leaned close and whispered, the first words he had ever heard her speak, "I know about the walls." Samuel's blood ran cold. He kept working face neutral. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do," she said softly. "I was here before. 7 years ago. I worked in the laundry house." Samuel set down his hammer carefully. "Why did you come back?" "I had no choice. Master Garrett sent men to find me." Her hands shook as she kneaded bread dough, motion automatic. "They tracked me to Cincinnati. When they brought me back," Master Garrett said, "if I ever told anyone what I saw, I'd disappear." "What did you see?" Ruth shook her head. "Not here. Tonight, in your room. Wait until everyone sleeps." She moved, or before Samuel could respond, returning to her work with the same mechanical efficiency she had shown since arriving. His mind raced. 7 years ago, 1850, she had been at Riverside. That fit the letters he had found. Whatever she knew had been important enough that Master Garrett spent time and money to bring her back. That night, after the house was quiet and dark, Samuel heard a soft scratch at his door. He opened it. Ruth stood in the shadows, wrapped in a thin shawl against the cool spring air. "The walls have ears," she said. "Did you know the house is made to carry sound? Master Garrett's grandfather designed it that way." Samuel gestured her in, closing the door. "Why? To spy on his own family." Ruth moved to the corner near his pallet and pointed to the crack in the plaster. The same one Samuel had found weeks ago. The old master. He was obsessed with knowing everything. He didn't trust his wife, his children, his business partners. He built a house to hear every conversation, every secret. Listening posts in his study, bedroom, even the barn office. "How do you know?" "I found papers," she said steadily. "Just like you probably did. 7 years ago, I was cleaning in the old master's office. That's the library now." I knocked over a shelf. Behind it was a journal, the original house plans, notes about listening passages, and how to use them. Samuel felt his pulse quicken. "What happened to the journal?" "Master Garrett caught me reading it. He was furious. Took the journal and threatened I would be sold immediately if I spoke. I was young and foolish. I told another woman who worked here, thinking we could use it to fight back, maybe warn the others." "What happened to her?" Ruth's voice trembled slightly. 3 days later, she vanished. Master Garrett said she was sold to a plantation in Florida, but no record exists. She just disappeared. All room felt colder. Samuel thought of the midnight shipment, the crates in the barn, the tone of Garrett's letters. "That's when I ran," Ruth continued. "Made it to Cincinnati, found work. Thought I had a life, but they found me. Master Garrett brought me back himself. To remind me, I should have stayed silent." "Why did he keep you alive?" "I wondered that too," she said, tightening her shawl. "But I think I understand now. He brought me back as a warning to everyone here. Learn something you shouldn't. Try to tell anyone. You end up like me, branded, broken. A message." Samuel absorbed this quietly, then asked the question that had burned in his mind since that first discovery. "The midnight delivery. What was inside those crates?" Ruth's eyes grew wide. You saw them Tuesday night. They unloaded nearly 24 crates into the east barn. For a long moment, Ruth stayed silent. Then she said, "I don't know exactly what's inside them. But 7 years ago, when I found that journal, there were other papers with it. Shipping manifests, account records, names of people in Charleston and Savannah." Master Garrett's grandfather wasn't only spying on his family. He was involved in smuggling. What? Samuel asked. "Anything that made money," Ruth replied. "Furs, tobacco, rum, weapons during the war with Britain." She paused, then added softly, "and people." The word lingered between them, heavy in the air. "You mean enslaved people?" Samuel asked slowly. "No," she whispered, voice trembling. "I mean people who were supposed to be free, people who had bought their freedom, been freed by their owners, or escaped and started lives in the North." The journal had mentioned reversals. That's what the old master called them. He had worked with traders who specialized in kidnapping free black people and bringing them south to be sold into slavery. The house's acoustic C system let him plan these kidnappings without anyone overhearing. He could meet with the traders, make arrangements, and plan the abductions, all while seeming like a respectable plantation owner. Samuel felt sick, and Master Garrett had carried on this work. The journal made it appear that it stopped after the old master died in 1842. But now Ruth gestured toward the crack in the wall, to the maze of hidden listening passages running through the house. If he was still receiving secret shipments, if he was worried enough to track her down after 7 years, maybe it never stopped. Maybe he just got better at hiding it. Samuel couldn't sleep that night. He lay in the dark, listening to the familiar creaks of the house settling. But now every sound seemed sinister. The walls which had held so many secrets were themselves a secret, a machine built for conspiracy, working in plain sight for 66 years. If Ruth was right, those crates in the barn didn't hold machine parts. They held something far more terrible and valuable. But Samuel needed proof. Suspicions and stolen conversations weren't enough. If he was going to act, and the thought of doing so terrified him, he needed solid evidence. Over the next week, Samuel became obsessed with the acoustic network. At night, he lay in his room, ear pressed to the crack in the plaster, listening to Mistress Garrett's private conversations with visiting friends. He learned about debts, social rivalries, her worries over her husband's business troubles, and her suspicions that something at Riverside wasn't right. From his listening post in the linen closet, he heard Master Garrett arguing with Mr. Garrett arguing with Mr. Dad Bennett about security. "I want every field hand accounted for at night. Any unexplained absence gets reported immediately. Make sure the new woman, Ruth, is never left alone in the main house." From the attic panel he overheard 2 of Master Garrett's business associates from Savannah talking. "The Charleston matter is nearly settled." Senator Williams managed to suppress the investigation. "As long as the federal inspector never sees manifests 47 to 52, we're safe." Each fragment was damning but incomplete. Samuel needed to see inside those crates in the barn. He had to know what they actually held. His chance came on a humid Saturday in late April. Master Garrett left Riverside early, claiming a 3-day trip to Augusta. Mistress Garrett took the chance to visit her sister in Mon, taking the senior household staff with her. The plantation was left under Mr. Bennett, who was lazy and spent most of his time in the overseer's cottage on the far side of the property. Samuel waited until the afternoon, when the field hands were scattered across the cotton fields and the remaining staff were busy with chores. Then he took his tools and walked toward the east barn as though he belonged there. The new padlock was strong, but the barn's structure was not. Samuel found a loose board near the back and used his pry bar to make a gap just wide enough to squeeze through. Inside, the crates were stacked exactly where he had seen them on delivery night, against the far wall. Samuel approached one and examined it. The wood was fresh pine, recently assembled. The stencil reading, "Machinery Parts, Savannah Foundry," was just a rubber stamp, edges slightly smudged. The crates were deliberately disguised as legitimate shipments, but they weren't. Samuel selected a crate from the middle and pried off the nailed lid. The wood groaned under pressure. He paused to listen, but only the distant sounds of plantation work reached him. Inside the crate was folded cloth, heavy canvas layered over and over. Samuel lifted the layers and felt his breath catch. Beneath them were manacles, dozens of them, still wrapped in oiled paper to prevent rust. Beneath the manacles were documents, printed handbills offering rewards for runaway enslaved people, blank certificates of ownership, and forms from county clerks in South Carolina and Georgia, tools for capturing, restraining, and falsely claiming human beings for sale. At the bottom of the crate, wrapped in oilcloth, was a ledger. Samuel lifted it with trembling hands. The ledger was new, pages crisp, but the entries dated back months. January 15th, 1857, 2 individuals, secured in Philadelphia, transport to Charleston, arranged, value $1,800. February 3rd, 1857, 4 individuals secured in Richmond, transport delayed, completed February 18th, value $3,400. March 9th, 1850, 1 individual, secured in Washington, documentation premium required, completed March 20th, value $1,200. The entries continued, each one representing human beings kidnapped from freedom and sold back into slavery. Each entry ended with, share to RMG, 30%. RMG, Robert Montgomery Garrett, Master Garrett himself. Samuel stood in the dim barn, holding evidence of a conspiracy spanning Georgia to Pennsylvania, involving dozens of people over many years. This was not mere smuggling. It was a coordinated operation to capture free black people, forge documents claiming they were runaway slaves, and sell them at auction across the Deep South. Riverside Manor, with its acoustic system, hidden passages, and respectable facade, was at the center of it all. Samuel returned the ledger to the crate, replaced the lid, and tapped the nails back in. He exited the barn the same way he had entered, replaced the loose board, and walked back to the main house, moving as though underwater. His mind raced. Every instinct told him to forget what he had seen, to survive. What could one enslaved carpenter do against such a large and protected conspiracy? Master Garrett had powerful connections, men who could suppress investigations and pursue fugitives across states. But Samuel could not forget the ledger entries. 2 individuals secured in Philadelphia, 4 in Richmond, each a person who had believed themselves free, only to be stolen and dragged south. People like Ruth, who had made it as far as Cincinnati before capture, people being erased as if freedom had never touched them. That night, Samuel lay in his room, listening to the house. It whispered around him, distant conversations, creaking boards, subtle noises of settling. But now he understood. The architecture itself was built for secrecy. Terrible plans had been executed here unseen. But now someone was watching. Around midnight, Ruth appeared at his door again. She looked exhausted, hands raw from harsh kitchen work. "Did you find what you needed?" she asked. "Yes," Samuel said, voice hollow. "You were right, all of it." "Then what will we do?" she asked, the question heavy in the air. Samuel had avoided it, but now there was no escape. "What can we do? If I try to tell anyone, the sheriff, a magistrate, they will never believe me. I'm an enslaved man, accusing one of the wealthiest planters in Georgia. They'd say I stole the documents, forged them, or lied to cause trouble. What about abolitionist papers in the North? How could I contact them? And even if I did, how long before Master Garrett found out? And I ended up dead in a field. Everyone told I tried to run." Ruth sank against the wall. "So we just let it continue. Let him keep destroying lives." "I don't know," Samuel admitted, sharper than he intended. He breathed slowly. "I need to think. There has to be a way, but I can't see it yet." Ruth was quiet, then whispered, "The voices in the walls. The voices in the walls. The voices in the walls. Master Garrett doesn't know you can hear them, does he?" "I don't think so. Because he still uses this house like his grandfather did, secretly, which means he'll talk about the operation, maybe reveal a name. A contact, something we could use. Samuel understood. She wanted him to keep listening. Listening. We need to be ready. Sooner or later, Master Garrett will slip up. He'll say something or do something that gives us an opening. And when that moment comes, we need to know enough to act. It was a risky plan, held together by hope and patience, and Samuel wasn't sure he had either. But it was still a plan. "All right," he finally said. "I'll listen." May arrived with stifling heat and the constant drone of insects over the fields. Samuel moved through his days, wearing the careful mask of a quiet, unnoticed servant, but his nights were spent pressed against walls, straining to hear. He overheard Master Garrett arguing with his wife over money, the mounting debts that threatened to swallow Riverside's legitimate profits. He heard Mistress Garrett begging her husband to step away from whatever dangerous venture he'd gotten himself tangled in before it destroyed them all. He heard Master Garrett meeting with his partners in the study, their voices echoing through secret channels to Samuel's listening post in the linen closet. The federal inspectors been reassigned to Louisiana. Senator Williams confirmed it. "We are safe for now. What about the cargo scheduled for June? Proceed as planned. We have 4 acquisitions confirmed in Baltimore and 3 more possible in Cincinnati. The paperwork's ready." He heard Mr. Bennett reporting to Master Garrett about an enslaved man from a nearby plantation, asking questions about people who had vanished. "I told his owner he's been handled. Won't be asking anything else." Samuel memorized every detail, building a mental map of the conspiracy. He learned names: Senator James Williams in Charleston, a lawyer named Preston, who forged documents, a slave trader named Hull operating out of Richmond, and a corrupt sheriff in Augusta issuing false warrants. Knowledge without the power to act was torture. Each conversation was proof of another crime, another life ruined, another person erased. And all he could do was listen and remember. In mid-May, Ruth brought urgent news. And all he could do was listen and remember. "They're planning something big. I overheard Master Garrett talking to Mr. Bennett. There's going to be a meeting here at Riverside. All the main players coming together for something called the expansion. When? First week of June. Master Garrett is sending most of the staff away. He told everyone to expect important business guests. Wants minimal disruption." Ruth's voice was tense. This could be their only chance to hear everyone together, to understand the full plan. Samuel nodded. "If we act, it has to be during that meeting. Gather everything, every name, every detail. Then we find someone who can't be bought or threatened. Someone with enough influence to expose this conspiracy." It sounded impossible even as he said it. But what else could they do? To listen forever, collecting atrocities in their minds and doing nothing diver. The first week of June changed Riverside Manor. Master Garrett sent most of the enslaved workers to distant fields, keeping only a skeleton crew to maintain the house. Samuel was kept close, supposedly to handle repairs during the important meeting. He suspected the real reason was simply Garrett's general paranoia, the sort that comes with running criminal schemes. Ruth stayed as well, assigned to kitchen duties under strict watch. They had few chances to speak, communicating only through glances and small signals, keeping up the appearance of strangers while preparing for what was coming. Guests arrived on Tuesday, June 2nd. Samuel watched carriages roll up the long drive, carrying men dressed like respectable businessmen and politicians. 7 in total, each greeted warmly by Master Garrett with handshakes and familiar smiles. That evening they gathered in the dining room for dinner. Samuel moved between kitchen and table, serving plates and wine, invisible as he had learned to be over the years, but he listened to every word. The conversation started cautiously, discussing cotton prices, politics, and the tension between North and South over new territories. But as the wine flowed, the men's talk grew relaxed, more honest. "The expansion to Illinois is risky," one said. Samuel recognized him as Senator Williams. "The population there isn't friendly to our trade," he continued. We've worked in hostile areas before, another said, Preston, the lawyer. It's all about the paperwork. If it looks legal, no one can prove otherwise. Papers didn't save the Richmond operation, a third man added. They were exposed by that reporter. 3 good men ended up in prison. Carelessness, Master Garrett said sharply. I keep no written records except the bare minimum to coordinate. Everything else is in memory. Samuel's stomach sank. If Garrett avoided written documents, the ledger in the barn might be the only evidence. Speaking of memory, Senator Williams said, his tone darkening, we need to discuss security. The woman you brought from Cincinnati, Ruth, is she fully contained? Garrett replied, she knows what happens if she speaks. Understanding and silence aren't the same, Williams said. Maybe she should be permanently secured. Samuel nearly dropped the wine bottle. He forced his hands to stay steady, face expressionless. Garrett paused, then said, that may become necessary. But for now, she serves as a warning to anyone else tempted to talk. The discussion turned to logistics, schedules for future acquisitions, contacts in northern cities, moving captives south without drawing attention. Samuel memorized everything, fury building inside him. They spoke of humans as cargo, discussed kidnapping and imprisonment as casually as businessmen talk about shipments, while fine wine and roast meat surrounded them, and enslaved people served quietly. After dinner, the men moved to Garrett's study for brandy and cigars. Samuel was sent back to his quarters, but instead went to the linen closet, his listening post connecting to the study. The voices came clearly. Our main concern is federal involvement. If the Interior Department investigates, our ties to Senator Williams won't be enough. We need to act quickly with the expansion, generate profit to buy more protection. How many acquisitions in Illinois? 20, maybe 30 in 6 months. Holt has contacts in Chicago to find the right targets, people free long enough to have property or savings. Those are most valuable. Transport, river barges to St. Louis, then overland to Memphis, distributed to buyers across Mississippi and Alabama. New identities, new documents, no trace of their free lives. Samuel closed his eyes, overwhelmed. This was not just a small conspiracy. It was a well-organized network across multiple states involving senators, lawyers, and sheriffs, kidnapping, enslaving, and erasing free black people. Then something shifted the whole story. What about the auction in Charleston? Heard, complications. Nothing serious, Garrett said. A man acquired in Baltimore last month insisted he was born free in Philadelphia, had papers at home, caused a scene at the auction block. Did anyone believe him? No, but it drew attention. A newspaper editor started asking questions. We had to take care of him. Made it look like a robbery gone wrong. Silence followed. Then Williams spoke, voice icy. You murdered a newspaper editor. We eliminated a threat to the operation. There's a difference. Not to the authorities. There isn't. If anyone links his death to our business, they won't. I made sure of it. The topic shifted, but Samuel remained frozen in the closet, blood running cold. They had killed someone. Murdered. Not just kidnapped. Anyone who might expose them was at risk. Samuel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his room, listening to the usual whispers, trying to turn chaos into a plan. Around 3 a.m., Ruth appeared at his door, exhausted. I heard you moving, she whispered. What happened? Samuel told her everything. The dinner, the study, the admission of murder. Ruth's face went pale. We have to leave, she said flatly. Tonight. Go where? He asked. They tracked you to Cincinnati. They have contacts across the north. We wouldn't make 20 miles before they found us. Then what? We just sit here and wait until they decide we're too risky to let live. Samuel stayed silent for a long while. Then he said, there might be one person who could help us. Someone with the power to investigate who can't be bribed by Senator Williams. Who? I don't know his full name. but I overheard the men talking about him. He's a federal inspector from the Interior Department who has been looking into illegal slave trading. They said he got reassigned to Louisiana, but that was only to keep him away from Georgia, which means he was on the verge of discovering something. Rue, the frowned. How does that help us? Because if they moved him for political reasons, it proves he found out something was wrong. If we can get him real evidence, names, documents, details, he could start the investigation again. But how can we contact a federal inspector? We can't even leave the plantation. Samuel had been thinking. The guests leave tomorrow. Master Garrett is going with Senator Williams to Charleston on business. He'll be gone for several days, and without him, the staff will be less watchful. So you want to steal the ledger and whatever else we can find, then get it to someone who can take it north. Maybe a free black traveler along the river road, someone who can reach the authorities in Washington. It was a dangerous plan, almost certain to fail, but Ruth nodded slowly. Tomorrow night, after the guests leave, I'll get into the barn, take the ledger, and whatever papers I can carry. You gather as much food as you can from the kitchen, enough for several days. If this works, we disappear immediately. If it fails. Samuel met her gaze. Then at least we tried. Wednesday afternoon, the guests departed. Riverside Manor. One by one, their carriages rolling down the long drive to the main road. Master Garrett left last, traveling with Senator Williams toward Charleston, and the plantation seemed to relax as he went. Mistress Garrett went to her rooms, insisting not to be disturbed. Mr. Bennett returned to his usual routine, offering minimal supervision. The house staff moved through their work with lighter hearts, now that the main overseer was away. Samuel waited until well past midnight. The house had been dark for hours when he quietly rose from his pallet, fully dressed. He carried a canvas bag, small enough to hide, big enough for the ledger and papers. The night was humid and dark, no moon in the sky. Samuel moved across the familiar paths, every sound magnified by fear. At the east barn, he used the same loose board he had discovered before, slipping through the gap in the wall. The crates were stacked just as they had been. He picked the crate he knew held the ledger and carefully pried open the lid. The manacles caught faint starlight through the gaps in the roof. He pushed past them to the oilcloth package at the bottom. The ledger was there, exactly where he remembered. Samuel began putting it in his bag when voices came from outside. He froze, heart pounding. Two men were speaking in low voices. Check the barn every night while the master is away. Be thorough. Seems like a waste of time. Who would break into a barn? Just do what you are told. The footsteps stopped at the door. He heard the padlock rattling. Secure. He pressed himself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe, praying they didn't see the loose board at the back. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one voice said, "Everything's fine, let's go." The footsteps retreated. Samuel waited until he was sure they were gone. He replaced the crate lid, tapped the nails quietly, and slipped back through the barn wall, ledger safe in his bag. The walk to his room felt miles long. Every shadow moved, every sound could be a threat, but he made it back, unharmed. He locked the door and finally looked at what he had taken. The ledger was worse than he remembered. It didn't just list purchases. It recorded the whole process, names of victims before capture, their jobs, their homes, notes on families, new identities after being sold, which plantations bought them, prices paid, and Master Garrett's share. At the back, folded letters were tucked into a pocket sewn in the leather binding. They were from Master Garrett to Inspector David Morrison of the Interior Department, the very inspector the conspirators feared. Samuel's hands shook as he read. Inspector Moe, risen. I write to inform you of serious irregularities at slave auctions in Charleston and Savannah. Some individuals claiming to be freeborn have been captured and sold, insisting they were kidnapped from northern cities. While many dismiss these claims as lies, their consistency concerns me. A formal investigation is necessary. The letter was dated September 1856, followed by more letters showing Morrison's growing suspicions and efforts to gather proof. The final letter, March 1857, said Morrison had been reassigned to Louisiana, and the investigation closed, clearly due to political pressure from Senator Williams. The earlier letters, however, proved Morrison had been investigating. They gave his last known location, the Interior Department office in New Orleans. Samuel now had a name, a location, and evidence. If he could get the ledger and letters to Morrison, the conspiracy could be exposed. But how? The answer came the next morning. A free black man named William arrived at Riverside Manor seeking work. He carried papers proving his freedom and traveled along the river road from Augusta to Savannah, taking carpentry jobs as he went. Mr. Bennett hired him to repair storm damage to a shed, a 2-day job requiring precision, which meant William worked alongside Samuel. Thursday morning they measured and cut boards in easy silence. Samuel thought furiously. William was free, traveling to Savannah, and from there a letter could be sent to New Orleans. Around noon, when alone in the shed, Samuel took a risk. "Can I ask you something?" In confidence. William looked at him cautiously. "Depends on what it is." "How careful are you with your freedom papers?" "Very careful. I've heard too many stories of free black people being kidnapped and sold." William's face hardened. "Why?" "Because those stories are true, and I have proof." Samuel explained everything in a hurried whisper. The conspiracy, the ledger, the kidnappings, Morrison's interrupted investigation. William listened, horrified. "You mean there's an organized operation kidnapping free people in the North?" "Yes, and I have the proof here." Samuel touched the canvas bag beneath scrap wood. "But I need to get it to someone who can act. A federal inspector in New Orleans." William was silent a long time. "Finally, if I help, and they find out, they'll kill me, papers or no papers." "I know. I wouldn't ask if there was another way. Why not just run north yourself? Because they have spies everywhere. They'd find me before I got 50 yards. But a free man traveling with papers and tools could move openly, post a letter, get the evidence to the right person." William looked away, torn. "Then what happens to you and Ruth if I help?" "We disappear. Once out of Riverside, we run. If lucky, we reach Augusta or somewhere we can hide. If not, at least the evidence is safe." Samuel thought William might refuse. Too much risk for a stranger who had built his own freedom. But William nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do it. But you need to write everything down. Explain what's in the ledger, who Morrison is, why it matters. Keep it simple so he understands immediately." That evening, after work, Samuel sat with a stolen piece of paper and pencil. Writing was forbidden for enslaved people in Georgia, but he had learned from scraps of newspapers and documents. His handwriting was rough but readable. He wrote, "Inspector Morrison, my name is Samuel. I am enslaved at Riverside Manor in Georgia. I have found proof of a large operation kidnapping free black people in the North and selling them into slavery in the Deep South. This ledger contains records of dozens of victims and the names of men involved, including Senator James Williams of Charleston. These men killed a newspaper editor who had tried to expose them. If they discover I know about this, they will kill me. Please look into this. Please help the people they have taken. Please stop their actions." Samuel, Riverside, Manor, Georgia, June 1857. He wrapped the letter and the ledger carefully in oiled cloth, then in canvas, making a package strong enough to survive the journey. Early Friday morning before dawn, he quietly went to the shed where William was staying and handed him the bundle. "The address is in the letter," Samuel whispered. "Interior Department, New Orleans. It's urgent." William tucked the package into his travel bag under his tools, where it would not be easily seen. "I'm leaving for Savannah this afternoon as soon as I finish the repair work. I'll post this the day I arrive." "Thank you. I don't know how to respond." "Don't thank me. Just survive long enough for this to matter." They shook hands, and Samuel felt the heavy weight of desperate hope settle over him. Maybe this would work. Maybe Inspector Morrison would receive the evidence, restart his investigation, and bring the conspiracy crashing down. Or maybe Samuel had just signed his own death warrant. Master Garrett returned from Charleston on Saturday afternoon, 3 days earlier than expected. Samuel was fixing a window in the main hallway when the carriage rolled up the drive. His stomach tightened. Garrett was supposed to be gone until Tuesday. Something had changed. The master entered the house, fury barely controlled, calling for Mr. Entered the house, fury barely controlled, calling for Mr. Bennett and Mistress Garrett. Samuel stayed in the corner, pretending to work while listening carefully. "There's been a breach," Garrett said, voice tight. "Someone in Charleston got a letter anonymously, detailing parts of our operation, names, dates, methods. Not everything, but enough to be dangerous." Samuel's blood ran cold. A letter. But William had left only yesterday afternoon. He couldn't have reached Savannah yet. They'd not have sent anything. "Do we know who sent it?" Mr. Bennett asked. "No, but it was postmarked from Augusta 3 days ago, so it must be someone local, someone with access to information they shouldn't have," Garrett replied. Samuel's mind raced. Did someone else know about the conspiracy, or was this unrelated to his stolen evidence? "I want everyone questioned," Garrett continued. "Every person who works on this property, enslaved or free. Someone knows something, and I will find out who." The interrogations began that evening. Mr. Bennett gathered all the house staff in the main hall, and Master Garrett questioned each individually, asking where they had been, who they spoke to, and whether they had noticed anything unusual. The questions were sharp, meant to catch even small inconsistencies. When Samuel's turn came, he stayed calm. He answered each question carefully, honestly where possible, cautiously where necessary. No, he hadn't left the plantation. No, he hadn't spoken to anyone from outside Riverside. Yes, he had been repairing throughout the house, but never entered rooms without permission. Garrett studied him long, and Samuel felt the weight of that gaze pressing down on him. But finally the master nodded and dismissed him. Ruth was questioned next. Samuel waited in the hallway, hearing voices rise and fall behind the door. He could not catch every word, but Garrett's anger was rising. After 20 minutes, the door opened and Ruth stumbled out, pale. Mr. 20 minutes. The door opened and Ruth stumbled out, pale. Mr. 20 minutes. The door opened and Ruth stumbled out, pale. "Tale 50 minutes, Bennett grabbed her arm. "Take her to the cellar. Lock her in until Master Garrett decides what to do." "No," Ruth said, voice shaking. "I didn't do anything. I don't know about any letter." "That's what we're going to find out," Garrett's cold voice answered. "Take her away." Samuel watched helplessly as Ruth was dragged toward the cellar stairs. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and he saw her turn, raw and accusation. This was his fault. His investigation, his stolen evidence, had brought suspicion down on everyone. That night, Samuel lay in his room, listening to the house. The whispers offered no comfort, only dread. He heard Garrett pacing in the study, Mistress Garrett begging him to stop this madness, Mr. Bennett reporting on the interrogations. "No one has confessed, but the woman, Ruth, she knows something. I am certain of it. Break her. Use whatever methods necessary. I need to know who sent that letter to Charleston." Samuel pressed his hands to his face, trying not to picture what whatever methods necessary meant. Ruth was locked in the cellar because of him. She could be tortured because of him. And if she broke under pressure and revealed his investigation or the stolen ledger, he forced the thought away. William had left yesterday with the evidence. By now he should be in Savannah or close to it. Another day or two, and the package would be sent to New Orleans. Inspector Morrison would receive it, and the conspiracy would be exposed. Samuel only had to survive until then and somehow protect Ruth. Sunday morning brought a change. Samuel was in the second-floor hallway, the same hallway where he had first heard voices in the walls months ago. He was alone, replacing warped baseboards caused by summer humidity. As he worked, he heard Master Garrett's voice through the hidden acoustic channels. "I don't care what you have to do, Bennett. That woman knows something. I need to know before this gets worse. I have questioned her all night, sir. She insists she is innocent. Then you're not pressing hard enough. Increase the pressure, and if she still won't talk," Garrett's voice dropped lower, harder, "then make her disappear quietly, just like the editor in Charleston." Samuel froze, hammer in hand. They were going to kill Ruth. Not maybe, not possibly, but for sure. If she didn't confess to something she hadn't done, they would murder her and bury her body somewhere on the plantation. And there was nothing Samuel could do. Or was there? A desperate and dangerous idea formed. The house's acoustic system carried sound both ways. If voices from the study could travel to listening posts, maybe voices from listening posts could reach the study. Could Garrett be tricked into confessing in his own house? Could the walls themselves become witnesses? But witnesses for whom? Samuel couldn't go to local authorities. They were either complicit or too scared of Garrett. William would not reach New Orleans for weeks, if at all, unless Samuel thought of the information he had overheard. One name kept appearing in connection with the failed investigation: Judge Cartwright of Augusta. He was sympathetic to abolitionist causes, and someone the conspirators feared. If Cartwright had been part of Morrison's original investigation, he might still be looking for evidence. Augusta was only 2 days from Riverside. If Samuel could get proof of Garrett's crimes to Judge Cartwright, not just documents, but a confession in Garrett's own voice, witnessed by someone who couldn't be threatened, there might be hope. But how could Samuel capture a confession? How could he preserve something spoken aloud? The answer came from an unexpected source: Garrett's journals. Samuel had seen them many times while cleaning, filled with business transactions, plantation accounts, and personal notes. Garrett was careful with record-keeping, at least for his legitimate affairs. What if Samuel could trick Garrett into confessing on paper? Or better, confess in front of a witness who could testify. The plan took shape in Samuel's mind, each part clicking into place. It was dangerous and probably would fail, but it was the only chance for Ruth. Samuel spent Sunday hearing supplies, fine writing paper from Mistress Garrett's desk, a wax seal like Senator Williams, ink in the senator's dark blue. He retreated to his room and carefully wrote a letter. His handwriting was rough, so he worked slowly, making it look official. The letter read, "Garrett, the Augusta situation is urgent. Judge Cartwright has obtained testimony from the Baltimore acquisition who made claims at the Charleston auction. He is preparing federal charges. We need to meet immediately to coordinate our response. I will arrive at Riverside Tuesday morning. Destroy all evidence before I arrive. Handle this with absolute discretion. Williams." It was a forgery, not perfect, but enough to make Garrett panic, to make him believe his conspiracy was at risk of exposure. That night, long after the house had gone silent, Samuel left his room and walked to the main entrance. Mail came to Riverside 3 times a week. Left in a box at the end of the long drive, Samuel placed the forged letter in the box, pretending it had been delivered by a courier, and returned to his room. Monday morning, Mr. to his room. Monday morning, Mr. to his room. Bennett collected the mail as usual and brought it to Master Garrett during breakfast. Samuel was setting the table when he saw Garrett read the letter. The master's face turned white, then red. His hands shook as he read it a second time. "Bennett, get in here," Garrett said urgently. Punctuation called, his voice tight with tension. "We have a serious problem." Samuel hurried out of the room but positioned himself in the nearby linen closet, his usual listening post, connected directly to the study where Garrett and Bennett had withdrawn. "Senator Williams is coming tomorrow." Garrett said, "There's been a development in Augusta. Apparently that man from Baltimore, the one who claimed to be free, has given testimony to Judge Cartwright. They are preparing federal charges." "How could that happen?" Bennett sounded alarmed. "We made certain that man was sold to a plantation in Mississippi. He couldn't have testified to anyone. Clearly, something went wrong. Someone reached him." Garrett's voice was sharp with fear. "Williams says, we need to erase all evidence immediately. That includes the ledgers, the letters, everything in the barn. What about the woman in the cellar? If an inquiry begins, she must not be found here. She's a loose end." Garrett was silent for a moment. "Take care of it tonight. Make it look like she tried to escape and drowned in the river." Samuel's stomach churned. They planned to kill Ruth tonight, meaning his plan had to succeed now, or it would already be too late. Monday afternoon, Samuel made a show of working on repairs in the East Wing, visible, ordinary, exactly where everyone expected him to be. But his mind raced over the last steps of his desperate scheme. At 4 o'clock, a carriage arrived at Riverside Manor. Samuel watched from a second-floor window as Judge Cartwright himself stepped down. Flanked by 2 men Samuel didn't recognize. His forged letter had worked better than he dared hope. The fabricated emergency had rattled Garrett enough that he sent an urgent message to Augusta, likely asking for legal advice, and instead of sending a lawyer, Judge Cartwright had arrived personally, probably because Morrison's interrupted investigation had left the judge suspicious and eager to inspect Riverside Manor closely. Samuel heard Garrett greeting the judge in the front hall, his tone measured. "Judge Cartwright, what an unexpected honor. I admit I am surprised to see you. My letter requested a lawyer for business advice. I understand, but your note mentioned federal charges and testimony from Baltimore. These are serious claims demanding judicial attention." Cartwright's voice was firm, commanding. "Situation you are concerned about." When they moved to the study, Samuel hurried to his listening spot in the linen closet, arriving just as the conversation resumed. "I received a letter from Senator Williams. Garrett said he indicated possible legal trouble from testimony given by a man in Baltimore. Someone claiming to be a free black person who had been wrongly sold into slavery. And do you have any connection to such a case?" "None at all. But the senator thought I should be informed due to my business dealings in Charleston." "I see." Cartwright sounded doubtful. "Mr. Garrett, I'll be direct. Inspector Morrison's investigation last year suggested a major operation moving people through Georgia, free people kidnapped and sold south. His work ended before enough evidence was collected, but I remained interested. So when I received your urgent request for legal guidance on federal charges and Baltimore testimony, naturally I was curious." Then Garrett said carefully, "I'm not sure what you're implying, Judge. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking straight. Do you know of illegal slave trading operations in this area?" "Certainly not. The very idea is offensive." "Then you won't mind if I look around your property to satisfy my curiosity." Samuel's heart pounded. This was the moment. If Garrett refused a search, he would seem guilty, but Cartwright would have no proof. If Garrett allowed it, and the judge found nothing, the crates might already be moved. The chance would be gone. But there was a third option. Samuel left the linen closet and hurried to the cellar stairs. Ruth was locked in a storage room at the bottom, guarded by one of Mr. Bennett's men. Samuel approached the guard with a prepared message. "Master Garrett wants the woman brought to his study. Judge Cartwright wants to question her." It was a gamble. The guard might check with Garrett first, but Gary, TT, was occupied, and the guard was lazy enough to appreciate a ready decision. He unlocked the cellar door and pulled Ruth out, her hands bound, her face bruised from previous questioning. As they climbed the stairs, Samuel whispered urgently, "Tell the judge everything about the ledger. The kidnappings. All of it. This is your only chance." Ruth looked at him with wide, terrified eyes, but nodded. The guard dragged Ruth to the study door and knocked. "Sir, you wanted to see the prisoner." There was confusion in Garrett's voice. "What prisoner?" "I didn't," but Judge Cartwright interrupted. "Bring her in." The door opened. The guard pushed Ruth inside, and Samuel pressed his ear to the listening post, barely breathing. "Who is this woman?" Cartwright asked. "A slave causing trouble," Garrett said quickly. "She's confined for disciplinary reasons." "What kind of trouble?" Ruth's voice trembled but was clear. "I'm confined because I know about the kidnappings, because I know Master Garrett and his associates have been stealing free black people from northern cities and selling them south. 7 years ago, I discovered evidence of this operation. When I tried to warn someone, they threatened to kill me." "That's ridiculous," Garrett sputtered. "She's lying." "Do you have proof of these claims?" Cartwright asked Ruth. "There's a ledger in the east barn, hidden in crates marked as machinery parts. It lists everyone kidnapped, their origins, and where they were sold. Master Garrett's name is on every page, showing his share of the profits." Samuel heard Garrett's voice rise. "This is slander. I'll have her whipped." "Bennett," Cartwright said sharply, "send for the county sheriff." "Mr. Garrett, I am placing you under arrest pending investigation of these allegations. If the ledger exists in your barn, we will find it." The ledger was discovered exactly where Ruth had said. Along with it, investigators' full, round manacles, forged documents, and crates used in the kidnapping operation. Within a week, Master Garrett, Senator Williams, and 5 other conspirators were arrested. The trial was held in Augusta in September 1857. It became one of the most publicized cases in Georgia's history, a rare instance where wealthy white men were prosecuted for crimes against black people. The evidence was overwhelming. The ledger, Ruth's testimony, statements from several victims, and confessions from minor participants who testified for lighter sentences. Robert Montgomery Garrett was convicted of kidnapping, human trafficking, and accessory to murder. He was sentenced to life and died in prison in 1864. Senator James Williams committed suicide before trial. Other conspirators received 10 to 25-year sentences. As for Samuel and Ruth, after the trial, Judge Cartwright used his authority to free them. Ruth moved to Philadelphia, working with abolitionists to help freed people build new lives. She married in 1859 and lived to 73. Samuel stayed in Georgia, working as a free carpenter in Augusta. He never returned to Riverside Manor, though he testified about the house's acoustic system during the trial, explaining how he overheard conversations that exposed the conspiracy.